You don't have to live with pain or chronic neuro issues any longer. In this podcast, you will learn how to stabilize your brain, body, and biochemistry for the rest of your life. I'm Dr. Teams, and this is the NeuroRESET podcast. So, hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the NeuroRESET podcast. I am Dr. Teams. We are hosting this at Desert Brain and Spine here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I want to welcome a very special guest today. We have Landry, who is Hazel's mom. Yep. And that's how she's known now, apparently. But, she's a rock star, and she's going to tell you everything that I don't know all the details about. But, taking care of a kiddo with, I think you said, special needs can certainly be a little difficult. So why don't you fill us in on why you're here, what you've been going through, how your system, and just like what's going on with your life, because I know there's people out there that can probably benefit from the things that you have to say.
Yeah, so we actually started with Dr. Bohr. That's how I even knew about anything with functional neurology. So that was November of 21 that we started seeing him. Hazel was 6 months old, and she had started having seizures when she was about a month old.
Oh, man.
And we didn't get a diagnosis until after her first birthday, but we started seeing Dr. Bohr just to start somewhere. We kind of were at a dead end.
Did you go through like medical and all that?
Yeah, we had been in and out of the hospital with her like every other week. We had a number of tests done on her, and nothing was showing up anywhere. And then we finally saw a neurologist with the main children's hospital here, and he said it's not a coincidence that she has seizures and has cortical blindness, so it has to be genetic. But it took us a year to find that doctor to say, oh, it has to be genetic because of those two things. But we had already been seeing Dr. Bohr for about 6 months, and her vision had already come back because of the treatments with Dr. Bohr. Her seizures had stopped completely after seeing Dr. Bohr for 2 weeks. And so we already saw like the amazing things that functional neurology could do. And what was it, 2 months ago that I was talking with Dr. Bohr? So we've seen Dr. Bohr for almost 2.5 years now, twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
So
for Hazel?
For Hazel.
Mm-hmm. So then what is kind of a day in the life of a mom with special needs kiddo? Like, what does it look like? Is it stressful? Is it all, what do they say, rainbows and unicorns? And so like, I know there's people out there that are living the life, but they don't talk a lot about it because everybody's grateful for everything in life and all that. So like, this is your time to shine on like what it's really like, but how you handle it, how you navigate it, and maybe the things that we may have done here to help you navigate that any differently.
Yeah, my saying to anyone that asks me about how it is, I always say it's chaos. Chaos all the time. I constantly live in chaos. But not necessarily bad, but there's never a dull moment. There's never just like, yeah, we're just hanging out. There's nothing to worry about. With a kid that has epilepsy and a number of other things with her condition. So with Hazel's condition, it's a form of childhood dementia. And it causes her brain to deteriorate, which then will cause her organs to start to fail. She is 3, has about 200 seizures a day, and just chaos of all the things. Yeah. And so you can't really just relax and watch a TV show. Especially with just the epilepsy alone, you always have to have an eye on her because you never know when she might have a seizure. And I also have a 6-month-old, I guess he's 7 months now, and he's typical, but still I have to watch him constantly, but also worry about my own health. And it can be really stressful at times, just staying on top of all the little things that we need to do, at least just for Hazel alone. Yeah, she has 9 therapies a week, constantly driving for those. She takes about 9 different medications a day. Those have to be on a very strict schedule. There's not really any flex with any of those things. So definitely chaos.
So no downtime.
No downtime ever. And if there is, it's typically like midnight, and I have to weigh the options. Do I sit here and relax, or do I try to go to sleep and not be too tired for the next day? Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's always just something that's on my mind, something that I have to worry about. Like this week, we're going out of town tomorrow, and her medications are due to be refilled. And I scheduled it all perfectly, but then the pharmacy screwed it up. And so now we have to hope that they'll be here before we have to leave Friday.
Jeez.
So just little things like that I constantly have to keep in the back of my mind, make sure that nothing falls through. If it falls through, have a backup plan. And even when we're just out and about, having a backup plan. If something goes wrong, then a backup plan for the backup plan, because nothing can fall through the cracks.
Never a dull moment.
Yep.
Jeez. So is that why Dr. Bohr sent you over here?
No, he actually sent me over here, which love Dr. Bohr. He's amazing.
Yeah.
A little sad that he didn't tell me about you sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first met him, he knew that I had been in a serious accident 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he even told me that he thought my recovery was great. He'd never seen a recovery like that. And I was recently asking him what type of labs I should get done, because it had been about 6 years since I had any done. And I wanted to see where my salt levels were, because I had been eating too much salt, just from the pot symptoms and trying to get the symptoms to go away. So I increased my salt intake.
So if we were to summarize what you're dealing with, and I believe you've been dealing with this pot stuff for a while, right?
Yeah, way before my accident even.
So like how long?
So I had a Holter monitor when I was in 5th grade, because that's when symptoms began.
Dang.
So they started back then.
So what are those symptoms? How do they start? What do they look like?
At least in 5th grade, it was like the heart palpitations, and I felt like I could never catch my breath. And so my mom took me in, Holter monitor. They said everything was fine. My grandpa actually had a heart transplant around the same time. And so they're like, she's just mimicking him. He's having heart issues. She's saying she has heart issues.
Okay. Yeah.
She's fine.
You faker.
Yeah. And so that's how I just continued life. Like, I figured that maybe it was just like, not necessarily in my head, but I was the only one that had to deal with it. And I stopped going to the doctor trying to figure out what it was, because the same thing would just happen. I was probably a sophomore in high school, got another Holter monitor, same thing. My heart rhythm is fine. I must be fine. I'm experiencing...
But you still felt like heart palpitations, the difficulty breathing or getting a full breath in.
Yeah.
Now, I think when you came in, you were having like lightheadedness or like pass out, like syncope and pass
Yes.
out, like half an hour and stuff.
So that's why I got the Holter monitor again when I was in high school, because I ran track year round and running sprints constantly. And then stopping at the end, I would typically pass out, or just lifting weights and then passing out, or almost passing out, just having the tunnel vision, honestly, almost all the time.
Jeez.
I remember there was one point, it was just before state, and my symptoms were just insane. I was passing out like every other time I would do a workout. My vision would go out in the middle of me running, and I would like get out of my lane, and obviously that would disqualify me if I was actually in the competition. So my coaches were furious, and so they made me sit out for a week until I could get things under control, and I got a letter from my doctor saying that I was fine. I got a letter from my doctor, but I kind of just figured it out and got him to approve it, which wasn't too difficult, because at the time they're like, well, all your tests are fine, so you must be fine.
So
it
you're
wasn't,
fine. Yeah.
wasn't hard to get that letter.
Yeah.
But I still always had to kind of deal with those symptoms. My teammates knew that when I was done running, I wasn't going to be okay. And I had enough time to recover from that one before I would start my next event. And my vision would be back. I'd be fine. I'd lay down and I'd be okay until I needed to run again. And then when I ran again, it started all over.
Never a dull moment.
No,
Oh
never
my
done
goodness.
it. But,
So that was high school.
yep.
What about after high school? How did that look?
Still about the same. I quit running after I graduated because I messed up my hips severely. Had to get hip surgery, and they removed the tendons out of my legs, so I physically couldn't do sprinting anymore. So that kind of stopped me from obviously being able to do that. So for the most part, my symptoms were not as severe as they were. but they were still there. If I stood up, if I like rolled over, if I just sat down for too long without like bending my knees or at a recline or anything like that, I would have symptoms. I increased my salt intake a ton, I wore compression socks, did all the things that they typically say.
Ran medications?
Right after high school, I wasn't, but then my accident happened in 2018, and I met someone else who also got a TBI, and she was helping me kind of figure stuff out post TBI. She sent me to her cardiologist, and he finally did a tilt table test, and he diagnosed me with, I always forget the name, vasovagal syncope, I think is what it was, and then he put me on a medication. First it was salt wasn't working, then medication.
Usually I think that one is mitidrin.
Yes.
Yeah. And so there's a propranolol, which is more of the opposite of what you had, which is more of the what they call hyperadrenergic. And so that's where like heart rate, blood pressure go way high. And then you get all kind of the same symptoms, but you don't have the passing out happening. It's the syncope side is where you actually pass out.
Yeah.
And so that's why the mitidrin, I believe, is designed to elevate blood pressure, heart rate, and versus the beta blocker, which is designed to lower blood pressure and heart rate. So, so you got the right diagnosis, you got the right medication for the condition, you did the salt, the compression, the meds. How did that make you feel?
For a while it worked. And I remember I went back to see him, and then the medication just like wasn't working anymore. And he told me that I needed to increase my salt intake again. And then every time I'd go back, just keep increasing your salt intake, keep increasing. And my dad always joked with me that at that point I needed to go get a salt lick and just always have that around because...
And this leads to why you want to get your salt checked, right?
Yeah.
Now going through that, do you think that's a good treatment? The medication, the salt, and the compression?
I don't think it's a good...
Do you think it's a treatment at all?
I would say it's a good Band-Aid, if that's a good way to explain it. I don't think it fixes anything. I think it just covers the issue and helps with the symptoms for an hour. At least for me,
temporarily.
It was, yeah.
Okay. And that's pretty consistent for what we've heard with patients. And, we see a lot of POTS. I mean, that's probably 90% of what we see, whether it's syncopal or the hyperadrenergic or almost POTS, but it's all kind of the same. And yeah, most people describe like, hey, like the beta blocker allows me to have a little more energy, or the mitidrin makes me so I don't pass out, but I still have every other symptom, right? Yeah. And it's like the debilitating stuff is not being able to function. Like you could even run with no vision, you just couldn't run straight, right?
Yeah.
But it just everybody's it's subjective to whatever the individual deals with. So if it's what you can handle, and if your life is too chaotic and you can't make it in to do something about it, then it's a good Band-Aid for now. Yeah. Or it's a good treatment. And so it's interesting to hear people's point of view, but most people say about the same thing. It's good for what it is because it keeps you more functional, but it's not the answer is kind of what I get from most people.
Yeah, and kind of what even got me thinking that I should get my labs done is I have my 7-month-old and then I have Hazel who's 3. I have to carry both of them all the time because Hazel doesn't walk. Rhett is just too little. And at the time we were living on a 2nd-story condo, so anytime we had to get to the car, I had to carry both of them.
Oh my gosh.
And
you're ripped because yeah.
I wish it was that easy.
You got that going for you, right?
And at the time I was lifting weights fairly frequently with my friend, and I remember the first time that we went to go work out, I had told her, I was like, I will most likely pass out. If I do, just like take your finger and rub my sternum. I'll wake up, I'll be fine. Like, don't even worry about it. She's like, well, that's terrifying. I was like, no, it happens all the time. Like, just rub my sternum, I'll wake up and I'll be normal, 100% fine.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
And she's like, well, that's scary. And now if you ask her, she's like, oh yeah, just rub her sternum and she'll be okay. And she's totally like fine with it. But looking back on it now, like carrying both the kids up and down the stairs and then possibly passing out and falling down concrete stairs with both kids obviously is not great in general. But the amount of times that I would walk up or down the stairs and then my vision would go out in the middle of it and I couldn't really stop halfway or any of that. But just being worried about, okay, what if that one time happens and I can't get up the stairs fast enough before I do pass out, or any number of other things happen. Like, it wasn't worth that risk of possibly falling down the stairs with both of them, or even just me, and making my TBI worse or anything else that could come of it.
Yeah. So when you came in here, what, been a couple months, 2-3 months, roughly?
About that.
What were you dealing with at that time? Like symptom-wise, just all the same stuff? Same intense level? Are you still passing out after working out and things like that at the time we started?
Yeah, but at the time, that's how it was. I was tunnel vision. Anytime I even just sat down and looked around, like, I would get the tunnel vision. I had a hard time catching my breath or getting a good breath. Loss of words. All the typical symptoms were still pretty severe at that time. I stopped taking the Midodrine when I got pregnant with Hazel because it wasn't good for her, to be honest. And I just didn't want to be on medication, so I never went back on it.
Okay.
But
so, functional neurology is a term that we use because we're not medical neurologists, but functionally, we work with the system functionally, meaning we use the body to heal the brain. We use different exercise to heal the brain and things like that. Tell these guys what your experience with, well, one, we'll cover you, but we'll also cover some with Hazel. Like, what does functional neurology mean to you? Like, what do we do? Help these guys understand.
the way that I understand it is you guys, you and Dr. Bohr and your other friends. I only know you two. You basically, that's a good metaphor. It's like if you're trying to strengthen your core, you do specific exercises that strengthen your core. If you're trying to strengthen a specific area of your brain because it's not working as well, you do these exercises that you give us to do. And it helps build that area to be stronger and just communicate better with every other area. And what I've learned with Hazel is either she doesn't have them or the pathways are missing or not working correctly. And you guys help to almost create them or strengthen them so that they can work with other areas of her brain and everything can communicate with each other and work the way that it should.
That's said pretty well. You must have seen a podcast or two.
Or 10, but you know.
And so yeah, I mean, she pretty much hit the nail on the head, right? Like I generally describe to patients the first time around, try to think of us as a personal trainer for the brain, right? There's, do we have our thing in here? We don't. So we've got 4 posters hanging up all over the office now that say pathways plus integration equals function. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people come in here at very low levels of function. Do you even recall what your level of function was if we were to give it a percentage?
Oh, I put some ridiculous number. I remember it was like,
let me see if I can pull it up.
Like 63.2 is, I think, what I said. It was something ridiculous.
Gnarly.
I always had a hard time when they say, okay, put a number on it. Like, well, my function versus someone else's idea of my function could be different.
Right.
Like someone's pain level.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah, so it's all subjective. So
yeah.
She, just for the record, she put 68%. And so I would say if you're still passing out and that's like, your 68% probably was a lot lower because you had such significant symptoms, but you're like a super mom, right? You got to just keep going. So you're going to change that number. And so once we got here, once you started doing this personal training thing for the brain, what kinds of things, what were you experiencing? What were the workouts like? What are some changes that you started to experience? And I wouldn't say that we're done. Mm-hmm. I'd also say that, you've got a lot on your plate, with there never being a dull moment, that increases that fight or flight system quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so, as long as those stressors are there, it's just going to be hard to stay on top of them. I don't know if you're ever going to be 100%. I'd maybe shoot for 95. I'd be super happy with that, knowing what you're up against. And for anybody listening, you might think it's not fair to say 100%. I personally don't think it's fair to expect 100% from anybody all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair for each, like, to push ourselves that hard, because it can cause some problems, but like, go for it if you want. Like, I'm all for optimization, but if anything less than 100% is unacceptable, then that causes its own problems,
Yeah.
And so yeah, tell everybody, or at least your experience. What was your experience like here with some of the things that we did? What did we do? And how did it work, if it worked at all?
Well, a lot of the exercises that we did, I've seen Dr. Board do it with Hazel in just a little bit different approach. But after like my first or second appointment here, I remember walking out like, that's it. That's all I have to do. Like, that's it? There's no way. But I've seen it work with Hazel, so I knew it would work.
You're a little more open-minded
Yeah.
than okay, this is crazy, this ain't gonna work kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And so even now, the exercises that I do is like figure eights with my arms and then my legs and then together, and turning my head quickly to the left while looking at one specific area, like a dot. And for me, knowing exactly what those exercises do helps me, I guess, one, to want them to do them more, because I know actually what it's doing, instead of just doing them and hope one day I realize what it actually did.
Yeah.
And even though they were so simple, just looking at the dot while I turn my head to the left or figure eights, I've noticed it make a difference already, even though it's only been a couple months and my life is still chaos.
Yeah.
I was telling the girls the other day that I bought a treadmill.
There's the word thing,
There's,
right?
yep.
But so we're not totally out of the weeds, but
Yeah.
at the same time, you've had this going on for a long time. You've had a pretty severe car accident. We can talk about that if you want, but just so they know how serious it really was.
Yeah.
But I think pretty quickly you started coming around. And the one thing that I will say that you've got at a little bit higher level than some other people don't is your attitude and your outlook. And I think that in and of itself has allowed you to be so successful, considering there's never a dull moment. You do a great job with it. You're always smiles. You're always relaxed. At least it appears to be. And that right there is like honestly half the battle. And so I appreciate that from our end. So whatever you're doing, keep that up.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I bought a treadmill, I don't know, 5-6 months ago, because I thought that would be the easiest way instead of passing out all the time at the gym. And I would do it each night after the kids would go to bed. And every time I would do it, I would fall off of it and like smack a wall, not even passing out, just I couldn't walk straight and I'd fall off of it. So my husband said that if I was going to do it, I had to do it in front of the couch. So if I fell off, I'd fall onto the couch or have barriers around me. I was like, that's dumb. Like, if I can't walk on a treadmill without having cushions around me or being in a bubble, like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So I gave up on it for a while. And about 3 days ago, I was like, I'll try it again. And I tried it again. And I was anticipating that I was going to fall off, but I didn't. Like, I didn't even, like, veer a little bit. And I was so happy. And I did it the next 2 days. Same thing. I didn't fall off. Didn't think I was going to fall off. Like, perfect. I was like,
That's
wow.
awesome.
Okay, so there's that. And there's also another thing that I've noticed. There's a couple of people that I've told this to, and they looked at me like I was insane.
Oh, boy.
And I'm pretty sure, even till this day, he's actually a good friend of ours. I think he still thinks I'm crazy. Like, the look he gave me. I was like, Ty, did you know that, like, your body's supposed to tell you when you're hungry? He's like, yeah, everyone gets that. Like, I don't think I ever have. He's like, you have to. Your body tells you when you're hungry and you need to eat. He's like, well, I mean, I get that now because now I have that, but I've never had this feeling. And it's like, you have to know that. Like, I mean, typically, like, looking back on it, it would be 3 or 4 o'clock in the evening, and I'm like, wow, I haven't eaten yet today. I should probably eat something. Like, I don't feel hungry, but I should probably eat. But now when I wake up in the morning, it's like, hey, you should probably eat. My body just tells me now. And
So you didn't even realize that was a problem before, because it was just normal for you to not eat,
yeah,
to not even have the signal.
I don't think I've ever had that feeling until about 2 weeks ago. All of a sudden I woke up and it was happening.
So what she's describing, give me a time, Ree. Are we good?
5.
Oh, we got 5 minutes, that's it?
We got 10.
We got 5-10 minutes. All right.
Okay.
So what she's describing is essentially this part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which basically regulates our hunger centers. What you're basically describing to me is that up until 2 weeks ago, that was not online.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting that you say that, we just had somebody else kind of in the same boat with POTS, who's been going to all the places around the valley for 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden, just in the last couple weeks, her hunger centers are turning on. She's like, I'm actually hungry. She's like, it's weird, right? And it was right after so I made this patient a bet. I was like, all right, I know you're not quite hitting the numbers that I want you to hit. I want you to shoot for this level of breathing, these exercises, and I bet you. And I literally made like a monetary bet. Like, over the weekend, I want you to do this. If you're no better, I'll give you $100. And then she comes in and said, what?
She said, fine, tell Dr. Teams he's right.
Yeah, fine, tell Dr. Teams he's right. But it was like that week that everything turned back on. And so when you look at the fight or flight, right, which is what you're describing of never a dull moment, your fight or flight system's really, really high. And it's been high since you were a kid, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
With the rest and digest being low. And so when you're in survival mode, you're not going to be worried about eating, right? And so something has shifted over the last couple of months. Of course, I'm biased, right? Hoping and thinking that it's all us, that we said, hey, here's the things and it's going to fix everything, but you're the one doing all the work. So I'm hoping that that's what's happening, is your fight or flight system is really starting to crank down. That rest and digestion repair center is cranking up, and then you're actually able to get blood flow to your eyes and to your brain and to your arms and to your hips, and basically entering this area of healing. Granted, you already healed, you were in a place to heal because you're up above that like 50%, 60%. And that was in addition to this car accident. So now that I know we're running out of a little bit of time, where are you at now compared to when you came in, like with some of the symptoms or percentages or anything like that?
I would say percentage is hard.
That's fine.
Much better, definitely. But my vision doesn't go as much. And I notice if it does, it's typically like when I'm stressing out about something, or like Hazel's medications fall through. And then all of a sudden, like, I get tunnel vision.
Yeah.
So I've definitely been able to pinpoint when those things happen and what I need to do to counteract that.
Okay.
Typically, if that would happen, I'd be like, oh, I need to go find some salt.
Yeah.
And now it's, oh, I should probably stop and breathe for a little bit.
Gotcha.
And if I do notice it, like when I'm working out, then I lay down and go from there. But one thing that I have noticed within the last week, this might be crazy for you guys, but I've always been the type of person that, like, if I'm doing anything, I just stop and just start dancing, just be weird. And I honestly haven't done that in probably a few years.
Oh, you're doing that again.
And I did it this morning. I didn't even realize I like started doing it. I just like put my like fist up and I just like started dancing to
that's
Hazy.
hilarious.
And then Hazel started like shaking. Like, this is great. Like, this is just fun.
That's hilarious. Did your husband catch it?
So he was already at work.
Okay.
But a couple of days ago, I turned on music and I was just dancing while I was cooking. And then he came down and he started like dancing. Like, see, this is great. This is where life needs to be. Like, and I've heard you say in a few of your other podcasts, the thriving. And I do still think I have work to do. I have not been great at doing my exercises at home, and that's definitely on me. But I've been more consistent with doing those, and I've noticed that difference with doing the exercise at home and then coming here and doing it. And I feel like I'm like borderline where I could say like, wow, I'm thriving. Like things are amazing. Like if I can be consistent with my exercise at home, like I can easily say like I'm thriving.
That is music to my ears. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Can we just drop the mic real quick? You cutting onions or something? What the heck? So that is super awesome. I'm really, really, really happy for you. That is just so awesome.
And
Well, on that note, I will say, what would you share with the listeners? Just like a short piece on maybe what do you think could help them thrive if they're not thriving? Or at least maybe start to do something that might get them in the direction of thriving.
I think something that everyone says is self-care, which is really hard to do a lot of the time, no matter what situation I feel like everyone's in. It's hard to just sit down and say, I'm going to take time for myself. And I'm still not great at taking that time to just get away from things and do it. But I find time to breathe and just be able to relax and calm down and do what I need to with that, even when I'm in the middle of doing all of Hazel's things. We could be in the middle of an EEG for Hazel, and while we're just sitting there, I can take 5 minutes and do my breathing, and I just feel better. And I feel like I can put myself in a better position to make the right calls for Hazel because my mind isn't so chaotic in that moment. And I think if I can take the time, whether I'm driving, sitting, doing testing with Hazel, and just my self-care of breathing, that anyone can kind of find that time to do that. And if they want to take the next step and come here and do a little bit more, it's not like you're giving them a bunch of drugs that they have to try and hope that it works. It's like you're just doing simple exercises that they can do at home or they can obviously do here. And I feel like that's the easiest thing, that a no-brainer to just try, because you're not telling them to start a random trial medication. You do some exercises with your eyes, with your arms, and things get better.
Awesome.
And so I feel like
it's certainly easier. I think it's a lot easier to hear coming from you than it is from us, right? We're a little biased.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We've seen a lot and we know that it works, and that's why we roll it into most of these programs. People do similar things, but it's always customized for you. The return to exercise, I think, is big because you're not passing out during exercise anymore, right?
no, but I've been pushing the envelope a little too much.
All right.
I'm
I
still
know we
working
need to
on
talk
that.
about some of
Yeah.
those things. We'll chat when I'm back in town.
Yeah.
And we'll review all that stuff, okay? Or right after this. So, well, I am very thankful that you've been able to get to the point where you are now. Like borderline thriving is like, I don't know, like really somebody was cutting onions in here. That was rough, but there were tears of joy, so to speak. And I'm just I'm proud that you did all the work, even though there's never a dull moment, and you find you just kicked ass.
Thanks.
So thank you for doing that, and it just makes us look good, to be honest. So
And I could definitely say if my mom is to watch this or listen to it, she'll be crying from the start, because not to jump into something else, but when my accident happened, the officer came to their door to give them a death notification. And then the function of where I'm at now, they said I would never even be able to be close to what I was like before. So I think the fact that I'm here now is amazing. Sorry, onions again.
yeah, I think we're like in the onion section here.
Sorry about that.
Well, so how about that? If you are on death's doorstep, there's still a possibility that you may be able to thrive again. So we've got walking, speaking, talking, onion proof of it right here. Well, Mom, I hope you're not crying too hard, but I'm happy that you are able to cry about this situation. I'm glad to be a part of it. I know we all are. We're grateful to have met you, and I'm really excited to see how far we can take this.
Yeah, me
So
too.
thank you for sharing your journey up until this point. Keep on helping Hazel and just pushing. We'll put you back together at any point if anything breaks.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Everybody, this is Landry and taking care of Hazel. She's got her own Hazel account, right? So
Yep.
if you can go check her out. But we're going to try to share this with Dr. Bohr and try to show everybody that there's a place for both parents and parents and children. So we'll take care of the whole family between the two of us, hopefully, and hopefully make it a thriving situation for everybody.
Yeah.
All the onions.
All the
All the
onions.
onions. All right, gang. Well, we're going to wrap it up for another episode of the NeuroRESET podcast. Thank you, Landry.
Of course. Thank
You
you.
guys can find more about us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, podcasts. Our website's desertbrainandspine.com. And if you have any questions, just holler. We'd love to try to help you out. All right. Until next time, we'll see you later.